Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole here on Connecting the Universe. I'm your host, author, and ghost historian, Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-host is Victoria Mundae, and down in the chat room, Alina, moderating the chat. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. This is our first Edge of the Rabbit Hole of the new year. We had a Connecting the Universe last week, Edge of the Rabbit Hole this week. We have a fantastic guest with us tonight. C.L. Thomas. Crystal is with us. So she is a paranormal author, photographer, publisher, podcast. So she pretty much does it all. Publisher of the Eerie Expeditions magazine. First two issues right in my hands here. So we'll be talking about that this evening. So, but without further ado, Crystal, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm very nervous to be on your show.
No need to be nervous. We just have fun. We chat. Victoria's going to have 2,000 questions for you. It's all good. So
only 300 questions. That's
300. Okay. Well, there you go then.
Got a late start.
So, first, Crystal, let's go ahead and kind of introduce you to our guests and get a little background on how you got involved with the paranormal. I believe, if I recall correctly, you're an experiencer. So, how did you get involved in all of this?
I am an experiencer. I didn't know that was a term. That's kind of like the alien term, isn't it? Experience.
It kind of is, but I mean, you experience something, so that would be an experiencer, or maybe, experience at. I don't know.
Back to that X and Y chromosome again.
Yeah, a conversation we were having earlier, right?
Well, I kind of grew up with the paranormal. I started having experiences it's the earliest memory that I have, actually. It was like around 2 or 3 when I saw the first ghost in my room. So it's very, very small. And throughout my toddler years, I saw a ghost off and on. That didn't stop until much later. I went to school and then kind of forgot about everything because, when you're in school, you just want to finish. And I was playing sports and all of that. Mm-hmm. So I forgot about it for years and years, but I did have experiences still, though. But I just didn't really think much about it. And then probably in my college years, like in between my master's degree, I was working on a doctorate. I had lived in a house with a significant other, and the house was so haunted. I had such horrible experiences with this house. It was actually the first time I was ever afraid of the paranormal. And so I went on to write about that years later. But I guess that's a little bit of my background with the paranormal. From that house, though, I started researching a lot and going on ghost hunts and things like that to try to figure out why I was seeing these things. Am I crazy? Do other people do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how a lot of us got into it is, are there other people who have experienced these things? Yeah. Am I crazy? That sort of thing. Because you don't want to be crazy, right?
Right.
So you said that you had, when you were young, when you were a child, there was, a ghost that would, show themselves on occasion. So what was that experience? What was going on?
So, you know how you always hear about people that have these kind of experiences. They say that they were afraid as a child and, they were terrified. They didn't have anybody to talk to about it. It's the complete opposite with me. I was not afraid of it. I didn't know to be afraid of it. And then I had a grandmother who kind of led me through what was happening. She would say, oh, that's just an angel watching you. That's just your grandfather. And then she passed away. And I saw her years later and was able to describe a great grandma later on to my mother, who didn't believe me at the time. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that I wasn't afraid of it. It was very magical. I would see a man in my room, and he was kind of like a protective man. And he looked like Santa Claus. So I called him Santa because I didn't know any other name to call him. And he was like a friend, a childhood friend. He would always be in the doorway, just kind of watching and guarding me. And it was just a series of events. I would see like balls of light dancing around the room, things like that. I saw when my great grandma or when my grandmother passed away, I knew about it because she visited me and said, "Tell your dad I'm okay. I'm with your grandfather."
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
And that particular incident, when I went down to the kitchen, my dad was sitting in a chair in the kitchen, just kind of staring off into space. And he hadn't received a phone call yet, though. And I told him, I said, "Hey, I saw Grandma in a dream." Her name was Nana. I saw Nana in a dream, and she said to tell you she's okay. She's with Grandpa. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "Go
Mm.
in your room, go play." And then it was just several minutes later that he got the call that she had passed away.
Oh,
So it was just always stuff like that happening throughout my life.
sure. So I do want to let everybody know that links to Crystal's website and to Eerie Expeditions, the magazine, the new magazine, which just came out here, are down in the description. So definitely check that out. In fact, I was very honored. Thank you for inviting me to write in the magazine. So that's here's those couple of issues, Eerie Expeditions, and wonderful travel magazine. So we'll get to that here in a little bit, but you've written a couple books here. We have Dancing with Demons and Speaking to Shadows. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write these books and what we can expect. In fact, the Haunted Road Media here is going to be printing a second edition of Dancing with Demons a little bit later this year. Yes, this spring. So
I'm very excited about that. So Dancing with Demons is my personal story with growing up with the paranormal, and it's primarily about that house that I lived in, because that was such a turning point in my life, was living in this house. I don't know how much you want me to go into with Dancing with Demons. I'll just leave it at that for now.
You can leave it at that, yeah.
The Speaking of Shadows, it's more historical fiction. I
Okay.
spent a lot of time in New Orleans right after Katrina. I was working with FEMA, documenting the aftermath of the storm and the cleanup process and all of that, the rebuild parts. And I got to spend a lot of time along River Road, and it has all the plantations, the sugarcane plantations, and they follow the Mississippi River down this one road called River Road. And every single one of those plantations have a very historical and paranormal story legend behind it associated with each of these properties. Every single one of them's haunted. And thank you, Kimberly. And Kimberly Horn is a sweet girl.
Okay. Yeah, and she's right. The magazines are beautiful. Yeah.
Both of the Horns are beautiful people. But anyway, her and Scott, I kind of put all the stories into one and wrote Speaking the Shadows. It's what I did. So it's not about one particular plantation. It's all of the stories in one.
Okay. Fascinating. And since Kimberly did mention here, yes, the magazines are beautiful. We'll dive into that real quick. So yeah, Eerie Expedition. So these are basically travel magazines where you're highlighting different spooky places around the world that you can visit. And the first one was on Haunted Transylvania, which was wonderful. I got Vlad the Impaler here on the cover, which is fantastic. And then the latest one, Yule Traditions, Hauntings Across the Southwest, but it's really all over the world. You have there's stories here on Charles Dickens, Green Lady at Whim's Castle, all that haunted Christmas tales and so forth, which was a wonderful addition. So what inspired you to start publishing this kind of magazine for the paranormal community?
So I was a photojournalist in my past life. Through college and throughout the beginning years of my professional life, I was a photojournalist, and I did a lot of shooting for Southern Living, and I just loved how pretty the photos were. I'm a big fan of National Geographic. I love to travel. It's something I thought about a lot, but the paranormal scene doesn't have anything that really focuses on the locations and haunted location owners or tours or anything like that. We're more focused on, like Bigfoot and things like that. And then TV shows are primarily celebrity driven. So I wanted to create something that provided a platform for locations and legends and hauntings and travel. And it is the only magazine, the only paranormal travel magazine that's out there right now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And they're beautifully done. And Alina put the link down here in the chat. So eerieexpeditionsmagazine.com for those listening to the podcast version later. And again, you can find the links down in the description. So yeah, they're very beautifully done. Looking forward to the next edition that's coming out here very soon. You were just mentioning that was going to be coming out. Did you say it was next week?
Next week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's focusing on the Fae.
The Fae, yes.
Yeah.
So, interesting enough, I thought the Fae was only in Ireland and England, but apparently it's all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. When you asked me to write for that one as well, I was tempted to write about experience that I had over at Hinsdale House in New York, which you would call the Fae. Or I also had an incident along the Illinois River. But I didn't. People have to pick up that issue to find out what I did write about, what the other contributors wrote about. So, yeah. So, Victoria, I know you're itching for questions.
That's called a segue, Mike. No.
That wasn't a segue. That was very blunt. Take it away, Victoria. Boom.
Mike, is that questions?
Mike and I both love baseball, and he's just like, knocked it out of the park. Go, run, it's your turn. I can't wait to see your magazine. And I know from the magazines you were describing, they are so artful and colorful and well crafted that there's no way you can possibly be doing this magazine every month, are you? I mean,
no, it's every other month.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. It's like, gosh, because that's a lot of work. Let me ask you about the magazine. What kind of articles are you looking for? Is it just anything travel related, and how do you submit it and all that good kind of stuff? Because I'm a writer too. I just want to say that. I'm working on a ghost book right now, title to be determined.
Are you plugging yourself here, Victoria?
Yeah, I wanted a magazine. No.
Would you like to submit an article? I would love you to.
No, I don't know. Can you tell me what kind? Do you want specifically travel? Like I traveled to Nova Scotia and this happened to me, or the volcano erupted and this happened to me, or are you just looking for like regional stories?
So usually there is a theme to every other month. Every issue seems to have a theme just to keep it, kind of streamlined, so it's not all over the place. But we do have two online newsletters as we'll get started. The magazine's brand new, so it's in the process of being built. But there is 2 more online where people can submit for legends and locations.
Okay.
So any of those. And in the meantime, though, if you want to submit an article for the magazine, the print magazine, just put it through contact@eerieexpeditions.com. And the articles I primarily look for are travel related, paranormal legends about locations. It could be paranormal phenomena in a particular location or a haunted venue. I love haunted venues. I'm actually soliciting haunted venues now to get connected with.
Okay, because I have friends who are they're very big into the cryptid side of the world, and they go on these fantastic Bigfoot vacations, basically. I'm like, oh my gosh, some of the stories I've heard, they would be wonderful.
I would love to have that.
Yeah, and Kimberly asked a question, a similar vein. Can anyone send submissions to become contributors for your approval?
Yes, they can.
Okay, that's exciting. Okay, so that's on my bucket list now. Looking for your magazine. Okay, I wanted to ask you about your first. I think you called it an encounter with an entity, because it is so much. It is almost identical to one that I had. I was wondering if you could tell a little bit more about it. What was going on? What was happening? How old were you?
You mean my first paranormal experience?
The one you called Santa.
The guy who, okay.
Yeah.
So
Santa sounds interesting.
Santa was just an old man that would show up in my room. So long story short, my family had a lot of kind of issues. There was a lot of screaming and yelling going on, a lot of fighting, that sort of thing. And this Santa guy the first time I saw him, he was standing in the doorway of my bedroom as if he was like protecting the doorway from anyone coming in that room. And he was just always there. It's hard to explain. And I just didn't know to be afraid of this guy, but he didn't talk or anything. He would just stand there and look at me. And he was just like this heavy set man, kind of short. He had a big white beard. He had the hair, like long curly hair that was white. And he looked like Santa. I don't know. There was no other way.
That's really interesting. I find that really interesting. Do you think he was there to comfort you, or was he trying to deliver a message to reassure you that you're okay, no matter what's going on around you? Or?
Yes, I think so. Because he became, I was just used to it. He would show up in my room, particularly at times where things got bad. He was there, and it was just so comforting to have this spirit. And I didn't know he was a spirit at the time. I told my grandmother about it. And she said, that's your guardian angel. And so I kind of associated Santa with this angel figure in my room. So there was no fear connected to this first experience that I've had.
I had something very similar happen to me. And as I was explaining it to a friend, because the figure I saw looked like one of the fairy godmothers out of Snow White. So I was not afraid either, because that's what I knew as a child. My friend told me, did you ever think that maybe it was a shape-shifting extraterrestrial that came to visit you?
Dun, dun, dun.
I didn't think of that.
Oh, the plot thickens. Okay.
Yeah, I never even thought of that.
Because she was telling me that that's one of the things extraterrestrials can do is they read your mind. They find something that you're familiar with. They will appear as that. So you're not afraid.
That totally makes sense. And it's just something I never thought about. And it kind of goes along the lines of the basketball-sized lights that I saw in my room as well. Like they would just be bouncing around the room. And my bedroom.
Okay, now you really piqued my interest with the basketball-shaped lights.
Yeah, there was lights. I would see those in the room sometimes. And they would it was the strangest thing. And my room was in the back of the house, and there was woods back there. So it wasn't like, and there was no road or anything. And there's no light back there, like no street lights or anything. We lived out in the country at this time. So there wasn't any cars or anything driving down the road.
Did you ever see the basketball-shaped lights out in the woods?
I was too little.
You're too little to know. Okay.
She was 2. Come on, Mike.
Well, but remember in this instance, you never know. Because I've been covering a lot with the orbs, light in the skies, all that sort of thing, following up on the drones. Because we started looking up at the drones in the sky, all of a sudden people are seeing the big orbs up there. And of course, in my book, Portals to the Stars, I start talking about the orbs, and in some cases, not every case, but in some of these cases where they are the portals that these entities are coming through. So if you've got orbs bouncing around your room and there's these different entities, Santa, whatever, is that the mode of transportation that they use to come into your room?
That could have, I've just never made that connection before. You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you another story that's kind of along those lines. Over the summertime, when we lived in that same house, there was one, I was down for a nap. You know how your parents put you down for a nap. And of course, I never slept that I know of. I was always there playing around. But I heard this buzzing sound from the window. And I looked and it looked like a giant bee. Like it sounded like a giant bee or something, like right by the window. And it was just, there's nothing that I could think of that would have caused that at that time. It was like a buzzing bee, but a little louder than that and deeper sounding. And it was like round like this, whatever it was. And it was yellow and black. So I just assumed, like a big bumblebee kind of thing.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
And as soon as I paid attention to it, it was gone.
Have you ever seen any UFOs or that you know of? Or
not that I know of.
Okay. That's interesting. What was the other thing?
As Victoria takes notes. Okay, that's interesting. What's next? Yeah.
Well, I told you my theory earlier. That's where I was going with this. You're falling into the
start asking if you have brown eyes again.
They're hazel. No, because I don't want to spoil my theory.
Depending on the light.
Yeah. No, it's just really interesting. Okay. Anyway. Okay, back to you, Mike. I really wanted to talk to you about your earlier experience, because I heard another interview where you were talking about it. It was like, wait, that happened to me. That happened to me. The ball of light, the beam of light. My parents were arguing. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. So I'm just wondering how many other people.
Really?
So
you had a spirit in your room and it's interesting that you related yours to. Did you say Cinderella? Or did you say you related it to?
Sleeping Beauty was on more often.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Of course, it's a kid movie, right? So
Yeah.
I was watching, you know, that 1970s.
Santa Claus. Yeah. Because that's what we found comfort in.
It was Rudolph. You remember that old show from the 70s, Rudolph?
Yeah, of course. The Rankin Bass, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like the Santa Claus in that, or he did, and that's what I associated them with. I know it sounds so crazy. Every time I tell this story, I think people just think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing about this community is we don't think you're crazy, because we've all had similar experiences or other experiences that that maybe even sound crazier to people outside the community. But, we all come together, we tell our stories and realize, okay, I'm not alone. Other people have had these types of experiences too. So that's the wonderful thing about all of this.
Yeah, because you found comfort in Santa. I had the fairy godmother, but she actually communicated with me and she told me, you're not like them. You're one of us. And that comforted me. It still comforts me to this day, when I don't fit in the crowd. So, yeah. So, okay. That you've given me more to think about.
There you go. So I'm kind of curious, kind of switching back to the magazines for a little bit as Victoria jots down more questions for you. What locations are you looking to cover? The world all over. There's some specific ones that you're looking to get to, like over the next year. What are you looking to get to?
There's so many. I have a laundry list full. So I'm looking at Egypt, ancient Egypt, with all of the legends behind it. I want to get into where all of the ancient Egypt stuff is, like all the archaeological stuff that they found over the years, like mummies, things like that. The museums that hold these things that are claimed to have hauntings and paranormal phenomena going on.
I know a guy who knows a little bit about Egypt.
I wonder who that might be.
Oh, that Muhammad guy. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, Muhammad. Yeah, I'll get you in touch.
He knows everything. Yeah. How do you feel about
Egypt is fantastic.
Yeah. Egypt has always been a fascination with me ever since I was little. It's one of my bucket places to go. So, in that issue, I want to write about Aleister Crowley. Did you know he spent the night in one of the pyramids there?
Yeah, there's several people that have. He did. Napoleon. There's some interesting. Paul Brunton talks about. It's interesting. So like Paul Brunton talked about seeing shadow people in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Then you read work by Freddie Silva, and he saw, and his whole group saw these like white angelic beings coming through the wall. So it's two different eras. Probably a good 60 years between those two incidents, but it's interesting the type of things that manifest there in Egypt.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to digging more into that and spending time writing about that. Yeah. And I need to get there and experience it myself.
I know somebody who hosts a tour.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
How do you feel about Antarctica? What do you think's going on there?
Oh.
With me?
Shift a little. Yeah.
People can't really travel there, Victoria. I mean, you have to be part of a scientific team, but
I have a friend that went.
They do have cruises.
He went like a year.
Well, you have cruises where you can kind of like, oh yeah, there it is.
Oh no, he was out in the ice playing with penguins. The bucket list. This guy, I want his life. I mean, he just travels the world.
In any case, I'm sorry, you asked her a question.
I don't know anything about Antarctica really, except for that it's really cold and it sounds like hell to me to be there.
Yeah, I don't do the cold either. I did think of one question when you were talking about Louisiana, going down River Road.
Mm-hmm.
and that all the plantations were haunted. Did you find any sort of a theme that would run through the plantations, or did they all have their each own unique hauntings?
They were all in relation to the slavery incidents that happened there. And also it very much connected to the Native Americans that used to occupy that area as well. So kind of like a mixture of the two.
Okay.
When you look into energy work that's being done down there with voodoo, there's hoodoo, that both hoodoo and voodoo are very different from each other. And then there's other practices that are going on as well, and they're mixing the Western African religion from that time period with Native American. So when you look at Mardi Gras and you see all the people that are dressed, you see people that are dressed like Native Americans almost. That's kind of a mix between the West Africans, particularly the Congo area, and then the Native Americans that occupied that. It's like a complete mix. It's really interesting.
Would that be Santeria, or is that something different?
Santeria is mixed in there too, but that's a different thing. That's
okay.
different.
That's cool.
But yeah, back to it's more the parts that I looked into was the slavery parts. One particular story that I've heard, or legend, it's about this. It was a lady who she was an ex-slave, and her name was Miss Brown or Molly Brown. And the story goes, she practiced voodoo. Everybody was afraid of her. And she said when she passed away, she would take the whole town with her. And so she died. And then that same night, this hurricane comes through and takes out the entire town. So that's one of the legends in that area. So I took that, and that's the main voodoo queen that's in the story.
And so
wow.
that's in the Shadows book?
Yeah, speaking of shadows.
Okay, yeah.
That's not someplace you want to travel to then, right? If it got wiped out.
No.
Okay.
I mean, all of the plantations down there, they're absolutely gorgeous, but they really are eerie. They have a lot of strange history and even phenomena that happens there. People will see dogs. People see shadows all over the place. There's just all kinds of strange legends and stories associated with all of them.
We embrace our superstitions and stories and legends here in the South. We thrive on them.
But I think that what happened there, I really tried. I know people, it's kind of controversial, that book, because of the language I used in it and some of the storytelling that I did in that particular book. But I wanted to portray the slavery aspects and how it was back then.
Right.
Well, and that's, you're trying to be authentic, and unfortunately, there were certain words and terms, and they definitely had some, views that we don't share today. But how do you be authentic to what happened back then without, saying or using those words or terms or describe things the correct way? So
right, and
yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah,
it's more of I wanted to portray it the way it was, because it explains the energy that's left over there, and that sadness and that heaviness that you still feel, that's still there because of these, the incidents that took place. So it's important to honor the spirits that are still there, to remember that stuff, not just to bury it and cover it up. I think it's really important that we know that history and honor it in some way. So I wanted to keep it that way in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. We cover up history like that, and then we forget about it, and then we make the same mistakes all over again. So we have to know about it. Yeah,
it's very true. It's very true.
That's really interesting that you made that connection to the passion, because I have found, because I'm here in Texas in the South, there is a passion. It is a very blood and guts passion in the paranormal versus what I think is up in the North, which is more like, let's go to Joliet or I don't know, one of your prisons that y'all investigate up there all the time. What? Okay, what did I say? I'm sorry. What?
It sounds like you're trying to insult the North here. I don't know.
No, I was going to ask her. Do you find that to be true, or do you find all the paranormal to be passionate?
I think it's passionate, but I think it's different. I think what you're trying to say is the hauntings are different in different parts of the world. So maybe that's it, and that kind of influences your paranormal investigators, if you think about it. If you're going in and interacting with that energy. So the Northeast, it's a lot older. First of all, they had the Revolutionary War. There was a lot of Native American wars. There was a lot of battles between the French and the British at some point. It's just different up there.
It's different history is what it, and I've been asked a lot of times because, I lived in Oklahoma for a while. I've lived in a lot of different states. And as I bounced around, people would ask me, well, which place is more haunted? And it's like, it's not really more haunted. It's just different history behind it.
Yeah. And in the South, the South carries a lot more sadness.
Yes.
They have the pirates on the coast. They have all the slavery stuff that happened there. When you go to St. Augustine, that's very different in its own because you've had all the massacres that happened with the Spanish. I mean, they just lined people up and shot them all right against the fort that's there. It's more, I don't want to say negative, but you know what I mean. And
it's tragic.
Yes.
Right.
When you come here, I'm in Las Vegas. I explore a lot of the mining towns and camps that are around up in the mountains. It's more angry hauntings. So you get a lot of spirits, like I've been called all kinds of names already. They don't like women most of the time in these places. It's just a lot more angry. They'll kill you. They'll say they'll kill you. Just things like that. So it's just very different. But if you think about the history associated with it, you had a lot of people after the Civil War, a lot of the people from the South moved there because of first of all, they didn't want to face war crimes. And then second of all, they didn't want to start over again with the North ruling, the Union, or not the Union, the Confederates. So they're all hanging out there. And then you had a lot of outlaws out there. You had a lot of battles with the Native Americans. A lot of greed that happens. A lot of people went out there to strike it rich and fast. You just had a lot of stuff go on.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to say I hang out in brothels, but that is one of my favorite places to go and investigate. And they are so derogatory towards women. They're very misogynistic, and women are just like, dust bunnies. We can get rid of them, but they just
pretty much. And then when you travel overseas, like Egypt and Romania, I've been to Romania. The hauntings there are very different.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, very, very different. A lot more ancient. Yeah. And again, it's different history. So yeah.
How would you compare a Romanian haunting to, like, I don't know, Cleveland, something in Cleveland?
Oh, so much more history to it, for one.
Really?
You have,
I don't know.
well, first of all, the people there.
Yeah.
It's rooted in their ancestry. You have like the witches that are there.
In Romania.
Yeah, the Romanian witches.
Wait, haven't heard the Cleveland Witches? Come on.
No.
I haven't gotten to that book yet.
I mean, you just want people. They believe that they draw on energy of vampires. A lot of people believe in Stragolia. I can never say it.
Strigoli?
Okay.
Yeah. They're very superstitious there. Like a lot of them are afraid to go outside at night, particularly anywhere near the woods. And they're very superstitious.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's one. I mean, the article there, I think it was in the article that I submitted for Hoyabachu for the first issue of your magazine, where the driver, just a driver going, dropping somebody off at the woods there, he would only take them up to a certain point. Yeah, he was like, I'm not going any further, no matter how much. Like, we'll give you extra money. And like, nope, I'm dropping you off here. You got to walk the rest of the way. Yeah.
I interviewed the tour guide that took us in. We went in for a night investigation in that forest. And the guy who took us, he put us out in the middle of that clearing and then left us. He said he didn't want to stay there. So he kind of wandered off to the side. He didn't want to stay in the middle there. And he says he had such a terrifying experience. It took him years to get over it.
Oh,
He
wow.
didn't even want to talk about it because he was afraid of just talking about it would bring it back to him. And so I interviewed him. I got him to commit to an interview, and he was really reluctant to say a lot about that.
But that's terrifying. He just didn't even want to talk about it at all.
Yeah. He did say though that there was like a lot of alien activity there in that forest.
Ooh.
Yeah, they've had because back in the 50s, 60s, that was under Soviet control, and you had scientists, that are doing their regular work out there, and the Soviets considered that anything that was paranormal, supernatural in nature was it was like totally against the state. They didn't want to hear anything of it, but you had these scientists that were saying, yeah, we're seeing these UFOs, and they're losing their jobs over it by just simply reporting UFO activity over that forest. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on out there.
It's really strange because it's right in the middle of a city as well, and it's a college city nonetheless. So you wouldn't really expect something to be there like that, but there it is. So, and there's just so much lore behind Romania. It's just like no other place I've ever been to.
Never really.
Hey, Mike, get your next tour.
I do want to do Romania, Egypt, and then Germany, and then we'll see after that. So Karen is wondering, can you still get the issue on Romania?
Ooh.
You can have it in digital. I'm out of the print version, unfortunately.
Okay. They would be able to get that through the Eerie Expedition magazine.com website? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So go ahead, Victoria. It seemed like you're about to ask something.
I was going to ask. I'm still going back to when you were 2.5. Trying to think.
I'll take the next question.
No,
because we have a question down in the chat. We can do that.
Okay. Did any of these kind of things happen to your parents? That's what I was going to ask. Is your family sensitive, do you think?
I think my dad was, for sure, because he's mentioned stuff like that throughout my life. But he never really, he was, we didn't really have the tightest relationship growing up, but he did mention it every now and then. And then he would leave for like months at a time and then come back. So I didn't really, especially my later life, he was just not there. My grandmother, on the other hand, she had a lot of experiences, and she's actually the one that told me, don't be afraid of it. They're just ghosts, or, it's just your grandfather visiting you. You're going to see a lot of, she used to say, you're going to see a lot of them. They're nothing to be afraid of. They're just people. Are there angels? And that's how she would explain it to me.
Was it your maternal grandmother by any chance? Or?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's another one for. Okay.
Yes. And I don't know.
Add it to your list.
Yep.
I don't know if this part matters or not. She was Jewish, so I'm not real sure if that means
nothing on my checklist yet, but it is now. No, my family actually. And some people say it's derogatory, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way at all. But they are Romana gypsies. They came over from Germany, 18 whatever. I don't know. It's just a heritage and a culture that, it's part of me, Yeah. So maybe that's just the same thing. It's just part of you. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all have that, coming down from our ancestors, there are those genetic markers that are passed down to us. I mean, it is part of who we are.
Yeah.
So, question here. I got a couple questions from the chat here. So, question from Kimberly. What about the native indigenous that lived in the earth homes before it was settled by the newer cultures? There are hauntings there, or are the archaeological places quieter?
You know what? That's a really good question, because I do go to a lot of Native American places. Mm-hmm. There's a place, I forget the name of it. In Tennessee, there's an archaeological dig place that is mounds. It's the mound people.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and it's one of the only places that still have, I think there's like 20 big mounds there still, and they're untouched. And you can actually go and tour them. So I went and spent the day with another paranormal investigator, and it was like you would hear like a vibration, and that was it. It was calm. It was peaceful. it's haunted, but not like we think of hauntings. It's very peaceful. It's different.
Right.
And then out here, it's the same thing. When you go to these places like Fire State Island, is that or Fire State Park? I forget the name of that part too. It has all the petroglyphs and stuff all around Las Vegas.
Oh, okay.
But when you go and see these places, it's very quiet. Like you don't get the whispering, you don't get the banging or the fearful stuff or anything like that. Now I know there is like people talk about the Bell Witch Cave. I've spent a night in the Bell Witch Cave, and that place is haunted. But I tend to think that with my experience there, just my personal experience, I feel like over the years of people investigating there, that maybe they took that energy to that place.
Yeah.
Because when you research it, the cave really has nothing to do with the whole legend behind it is not true.
Mm-hmm.
The cave's not even on that property. The original property is more than 10 miles away from it. But I think it's everybody else's energy being left there. So I think the neighbor.
Yeah, they've kind of fed it into it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Chaco Canyon, I haven't been there. It's on my bucket list.
Oh, love it. You got to go.
That haunting too, though, from my understanding, is very different. It's very powerful.
Yeah, and see, I wouldn't even call it a haunting. It's to me, it's a very reverent area. There's a lot of energy there.
Yes.
And you look at the story on the petroglyphs where they're talking about the star people coming to Earth using the portals to come here. Of course, they did a lot of ceremony out there, and everything's astronomically aligned. So it's just a very, very reverent area. And like you're talking about the mounds, we have those here in Ohio too, with the Great Circle Earthworks and all that. And you're right, it gets quieter out there because I think you have that reverence, but it's like a palpable energy that you can feel, and just sit there, take in the quiet, meditate, and you'll feel it. Yeah,
it's almost like you go there and recharge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're more quiet because of the age? Because they are older?
I have a theory about that. I think it's because they were so spiritual as a people, and they really embrace the idea that a person doesn't die; they just kind of move on to the next phase of life. Whereas in our culture, death is like an ends to an all, right? You're either going to hell, or damnation, or that's it, or whatever. So you need to get what you get now. I think there's a difference in energy between the cultures. I think that
that's like the same thing with Egypt. When you're talking about Egypt, it's when we call it their afterlife journey, but it's not. They never looked at it as the afterlife. It was just another phase of life that you're losing this body in this world, but you're just going on to the next. So they look at it very, very differently than the whole heaven and hell and fire and brimstone and all of that. Yeah. So Scarlett is asking, have you ever had to cleanse an area from uncomfortable entities?
Yes, I have. And it's all from ghost towns. There's just something about these old abandoned ghost towns out here. There's just meanness to it. I don't know. The house that I lived in, the Dancing with Demons book house, I had to as well. There was a lot of stuff that happened to me in that house. Actually walked away from that house with stage 2 cancer. That's what made me move and say I was done. And I know it's a far-fetched to say this, but I really feel like all of the negativity and all the energy may have caused me to get sick. And I'm not saying ghost causes cancer, but I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying in my particular case, that's what I kind of believe.
It really is. It really is, because if you think about it, it is a dis-ease. It's a disease. So when you're putting your body into that state or that emotional state, things do manifest.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in like a negative vibration all the time, that's gonna, there's gonna be wear and tear on your body. Yeah.
Right.
So, so I guess the question then would be, would Native American sites, the mounds, Chaco Canyon, that sort of thing, would that be a potential issue for Eerie Expeditions? Absolutely.
I'm actually planning editorial calendar. I just don't have it all together yet. Like this next issue is going to be castles. I don't want to give it all away just on air, but there's going to be a calendar that's following a lot of this stuff. So Egypt, I'm just so excited. I want to do an issue just on Huska Castle. Have you guys heard of that place yet? Out in
No.
Where?
Huska Castle.
Where's that?
No. Where's that at?
It's in.
We'll have to get the magazine.
There you go.
This is okay. So if you're going to Germany, you have to go to Huska Castle. It's just outside of Prague, not too far. It's a castle, and it's the only one that's ever built to keep something in instead of something out. And the story is back in 1100, the people were getting sick, and they were getting they figured out that something was in the water that they were drinking. And the well was where Huska Castle is. But, they didn't know about germs back then. So they said that it was demons making them sick. It was coming out of the well and making them sick. So they built this castle to appease Satan, to keep his demons in. So this castle is built just to keep demons in. And when you walk in there, there's carvings of demonic figures everywhere. There's a sanctuary that has an old painting. You can still see it. There's a painting on the wall of I think it's Saint Michael taking down the dragon. It's all the symbolism to keep Satan and his demons in. It's very strange. No one's ever lived in this castle until recent. But an interesting thing is during World War II, when that part of the world was under the Third Reich, Hitler had some scientists and people come in, and they found a bunch of occult books there, and they wanted to study how to use that energy that they believed still resided in Huska Castle to win the war. So
that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all. Well, Hitler was always taking an angle like that. Can we figure out a way to use the supernatural to win the war? Yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot of occult stuff, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question about out west. You said it a couple of times that the energy out there is angry. Do you think maybe it's because life was just so hard and it was such a struggle? That's some of the energy you're picking up? In addition to the anger.
That is definitely some of the energy that you do pick up out here. But there's another thing too. And Kimberly Horn, who is listening to the show,
She's awesome.
Yes. We went out to Rhyolite just recently, and as soon as the sun started coming down, we started picking up on a different energy, and it was more elemental. And it's very, and I didn't really say anything. I started picking it up, and then Kimberly said that she started picking that up, and it was like a, what do you call it? It was like a
primal. It's very primal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's something I've experienced before out here. There's a house that I did an investigation for, and this lady, she has a haunted house, and she's lost 3 kids in this house. And then she was on her 3rd husband. He's since passed away, but she attributes all of it to the land that she's living on. So I went out there to investigate. She wanted to know what was going on, and it's really interesting. The house was haunted, but it was haunted by humans. She has an orchard outside, and it's all almond orchard. And when you walk around there, I started seeing, I kid you not, I saw 2-foot shadows. They would cross how when you walk through an orchard, if you've ever been in one, it's like rows. They would cross the rows like they were scrambling from us. They were in every different directions. And the team I was working with, they all saw it too. And they were running around trying to get it on camera as proof that we were seeing these things.
Sure.
And so there was another group that I talked to. It was a Native American group, and the guy's name was Hero. He has a couple of guys that work with the Native American culture with the paranormal, because they see it so much different than we do. And his theory is that the Native Americans put those creatures on their lands, and this land was all being taken from them. So they didn't want anybody else to be able to use that land. So those spirits are still there protecting that land, and they affect anyone that comes in. So you have to kind of, you can't kick them out. You have to appease them with different offerings and make peace with them. So that's the way
Exactly.
they do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's kind of, the whole idea behind the skinwalkers as well. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we have some elemental energy here where I live. I'm like right where Texas changes from desert to prairie. And people are like, no, you don't have elementals. It's all ghosts, it's demons. But there's so much, because we had so much Native American culture here too, that just gets overlooked.
Well, I used to say that too. And then this property was the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. And I knew right away that it wasn't humans because there was no connection there.
Mhm.
You couldn't really communicate with them.
Yeah, it's something you feel. It's like a resonance you have.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're all over the U.S. Strangely enough, I think if you
that
look for them, you'll find them. Maybe
they need to be highlighted more because people just don't talk about them.
Well,
Yeah.
America's Stonehenge.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is supposed to be haunted by fairies or the fae.
Yeah,
Sounds
that's
like
an
a road trip.
interesting location. Haven't yet been, but like Hinsdale House, I never really experienced much within the house. House was to be haunted, all that sort of thing. For me, it was always the land, and it's Native American land. And you go back into those woods, and there's all kinds of. That's what I had. I had an experience with the fae back in those woods. Myself and Megan Talbert. It was really, really fascinating. It had more to do with the land than anything going on at the house. And in fact, one of the tests that we conducted was just, had psychic medium out there, and it hit a certain point, heading up because there's stairs that go into the back, and hit a certain point. She's like, there's an energy shift here. Something has changed. And it was right to that point where the fae had come down to stop the previous time I'd been out there. It's like, okay, that's interesting. It has some dowsing rods. And so I'm walking from the back of the house out toward that area. They're pointing straight. And right where it got to the point where she said there's an energy shift, boom, they flipped 180 degrees back toward the house. So yeah, different energies between whatever's going on out there, the house and the land. And there's a lot more going on with the land there. And I think and people have, talked about seeing pukwudgies out there or other different types of entities. So yeah, I think a lot of that, I think you're right, that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is the thing to look at is that these entities are called different things all over the world.
Oh, sure.
So,
Yeah.
like, Ireland has like 8 different imps or fae alone, and then all these other. I think there's like the yin in the Asian cultures, in the Middle Eastern cultures too, and then there's like. Where's that list I just had? There's a whole list. You just think about gnomes and little people, and it goes on and on.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting work by Jacques Vallée in the 1960s. Here's a guy. He's an astronomer. He starts doing a lot within the UFO community, and then all of a sudden he starts making these connections of these experiences that people are reporting to be having with extraterrestrials, small gray beings, and these sorts of things. And they're very, very similar to the ancient legends and lore of fairies, gnomes, and all of these other beings. And it's like, are we just really talking about the same type of beings and entities, but there's a different cultural context to it?
I really think there is. And just today I was interviewing some people for the magazine, and I interviewed a native Hawaiian.
No,
they have fae there, and I asked him to describe what they would look like to his people, and he said that they look like 4-foot humans with curly brown hair.
Oh,
they just look human. So right after that call, I talked to another guy in Ireland who has a farm. It's a working historical farm that's been running since the 17th century. It's been in his family since the 17th century. And there's like an ancient fairy mound there and all sorts of things. And so I asked him the same question, and I didn't say anything about my previous conversation. I just asked him, can you tell me or describe what you see when you see the Fae? And he said, it's a 4.5 to 5 foot human. So they even looked the same to these people.
Yeah.
He didn't say it had brown hair. He said that it looked like a human that was a little bit fuzzy. That's what he said. Or
okay.
furry.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Ever go to Dublin? Check out the Leprechaun Museum. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. That's like, yeah, the stories might be a leprechaun in this particular instance, but they sound, again, like a lot of these different stories that you're talking about. Yeah.
Wasn't there a culture in Ireland called the Picts or something like that? That were people who were shorter in stature that got misconstrued, and that's where the leprechauns came from. Or am I getting my stories mixed up?
Where are the Picts? Where the
that they would disappear.
Yeah,
they would disappear, and they had like little hideaways, and that people are like, oh, they disappeared, but they were earthen homes or something.
Yeah, where was that? Anybody down in the chat room remember where that? Because I know what you're talking about.
My stories are
well. I'm trying to think what the conversations I had today. There's so many of them. No, but I did.
I almost want to say Germany, but I might be wrong on that.
No, it's not Germany. It's
not Germany. Maybe it's. So you're thinking it's in the UK though, somewhere like maybe.
I thought it was in Ireland.
Ireland would, yeah.
Because they would disappear, and people are like, they disappeared. Where they go? But they really went into like the burrows that they had to, hide themselves for invaders, and that's where the superstition from the leprechauns came from, or whatever.
Both of the interviews I had today, both of them reported that when they see the Fae, they do disappear. Like they're there and then they're not. So they have to go through this whole thing about honor and all that to appease them because they saw them. They don't like to be seen or something like that.
Yeah, it's Scotland, by the way.
If that's the case, I'm a fairy then, or a fae. Go away, don't look at me. Behind the scenes.
And then there's Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, northern and eastern Scotland. Yep,
that's close. Somebody who wore a kilt at one time.
Oh, don't because the Irish and Scottish will argue who has the right stone of destiny and all that. Yeah, nope, don't.
Outlander. That's all I'm saying. Outlander.
Yeah. So they both have ties back to ancient Egypt, though. So there's that.
Okay.
But no, it's interesting because, archaeologically speaking, you look at the island of Flores, what was it, 25 years ago or something like that, where they had found what they ended up dubbing the Hobbit people. And they were little, 4 foot tall humanoid beings. And they were actually finding the remains of them. And when that story first broke, I started likening it to my ex-wife was part Irish, and so I started drawing correlations between her and the Flores Hobbit people. Like, and I started saying, no, these were the leprechauns. You're descended from leprechauns.
Hence X.
Not saying anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Did she make cookies? Did she live in a tree? No, that was Keebler. Never mind.
No, that was the Keebler elves.
Oh, well.
You see, even in pop culture, though, we just named like 3 or 4 right off that are very similar to the Fae.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so embedded in our culture. You have the Fae, you have the Keebler elf, you have gnomes, you have gargoyles, could be something like that. You have the little Lilliputians from what's that? What's that book that those are from? Where they tie down the human?
Jonathan Swift? No.
Yeah. Yes.
What is Jonathan Swift? Let me ring in.
What is that book though? Well, you know what I'm talking about.
The Lilliputians.
And then what about Christmas elves? You have. They're just all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Dwarves,
I bet you could name 50 of them if you really sat down and wrote them all out.
That would be a fun magazine.
There you go. So we are getting down to the end of our public broadcast. Those that are members of the Connect Universe portal, hang on, because we will be going to the after show. But real quick, Chris, I want to give you a chance here to go ahead and plug your website, plug your the magazine, and also you do have podcasts as well. Small Town Tales and the Gateway podcast. So plug away.
You can find all that stuff on clthomas.org. And then the magazine can be found at eerieexpeditionsmagazine.com.
All right, fantastic. So,
and
again, I do have those links down in the description. So by all means, please check them out. Lots of great material there. So, all right, everybody, we're going to be kicking over to the after show. Those on the public side, again, thank you very much for hanging out with us this evening. Until next time, time really exists.